Yesterday, let me say to you that I have tried to give my lectures and conferences with a very simple language because we lawyers tend to be terribly complicated. And I recall that we had during our first year of law school a civil judge professor who started talking to us about uh, the legal actions, judicial warrants, constables. And I was wondering, when they're talking about diligencias in Spanish, are they referring to a carriage or is this a judicial action? So for many, many years, the legal actions were transferred through language, and it was also very important to have testimonials and the role of witnesses in all the legal elementary actions, these minimum legal actions. So it is given this reason that at some points during the Roman times, when we had even a will, we would even call up to 10 witnesses. And well, as you know, paper in itself lasts in a case as the city of Acapulco, which is the tropic area, it does not last any more than 100 years. So our ancestors, the Egyptians, the Chaldeans, and in Babylonia, the elements such as the Code of Hammurabi, the laws of Manu, were all in petroglyphs. These were the only ways in which this legal orders will be everlasting. In a summary of the world, we can see that mankind has lived in community as we have lived in the condominium system now with our neighbors that are normally tolerating people, and you just greet each other, and you go into your apartment and you have your privacy and you keep on with your life. And this is how life was before. If you even analyze at this point some of the cities, such as Ephesus, the Roman settlements and cities, they lived very much like us, but they had no electricity. They didn't have private ownership. And during the feudal times, if you recall, there were people that were not even owners of their own life. They acted as slaves. As a matter of fact, yesterday I mentioned that mankind has only been the owner during Roman times in their three stages, during the monarchy, the republic, and during the empire time. And then it turned out into Byzantium Rome after the year 500. And this is how the Byzantine Roman was going to the northern part of Europe. It was in contact with the Germanic groups that invaded little by little these different areas. And this is the reason for which the German uh, legal system, is following the Latinan, the Roman law. And the Roman law system is located in France, in Italy, in Spain, and more so when we talk about notary public's function. And for example, Germany has a system which is identical to ours. The German notary publics are not only notary publics, but also recorders, where they inscribe and where they make the domain transfer. So yesterday we talked about co-ownership. We talked from the philosophical point of view, property ownership systems, and I omitted mentioning a few elements that I want to bring to your attention because I was mentioning before to you that human beings were true owners during Roman times in its three stages, and then after the French Revolution. But also the English that had their civil war uh, that at what was not yet England, because it was three nations, Scotland, Ireland, and England. And well, they had their civil war in the mid of the 17th century. But from that moment on, property was granted. And there is something that is quite interesting when we talked about property system in England, and given the fact that many of them are lords and they have their own properties, uh, when the wills are made and the successions are made, and when we're talking about major land extensions, castles, such as the one of the Spencers family, to which Lady D was a part of, well, there is an element that for many years they called this the entailed state, and this entailment means a sequence and the primogeniture heir situation, which is the firstborn heir. And well, the idea of the fact that wills and the major land extensions, where there are duchies in England, for example, were inherited only to the firstborn, this is in order not to disseminate land ownership. And by not disseminating land ownership in the major extensions of land of these duchies and castles and chateaus, well, this is because they have this system in which the firstborn is the heir who would be in charge of supporting and looking after his kindred. This is brothers and sisters. But let's assume that it will be an inheritance in equal parts among six heirs. Well, they will be disseminating their land, distributing it among the six owners. Even the castle will be distributed among the six heirs, and they will be starting a condominium system. So that is why something like this is quite important for these land extension areas. There are also universal rights, but there are certain restrictions in regards to the property of the major land extensions of the English castles and fortresses. As a matter of fact, yesterday, when I talked to you from the philosophical point of view, uh, I talked to you about Thomas Hobbes, Kant, and Rousseau, and I also touched the point of Article 27 of the Mexican Constitution. And I showed you how within the Mexican laws and the Mexican Constitution, in its Article 27, it is expressed that from its very origin, property is in the hands of the state. And then I shared with you the point that uh, the Mexican policies and laws have a Hobbesian philosophical perspective, because in reality, first of all, the owner is the state. The state transfers property to the private person. And as I told you yesterday, I'm doing a recap of yesterday's presentation where there are authorities' actions that take away the property from the private person back to the state. But I did not mention to you the fact that within civil associations of condominiums, it is not forbidden to have foreigners participating. If it is true there are certain restrictions for buying land in Mexico that are expressed in this 27 article of the Mexican Constitution, and they have to buy through a trust fund where they have their personal rights, and the fiduciary has the real rights over the settler, but the foreigner can participate within the condominium association, and they can participate also in mercantile Mexican associations up to 49%, and in civil associations, since these are not stockholder rights but associating rights, they can be a part of them. But we have to place the clause of exclusion of foreigners, where it's stated that they resign to the protection, legal protection of the country, and that all of these legal processes will be considered Mexican for any claim. Yesterday, when we were talking about the expression of will for integrating a condominium system, it is a way of self-mandating yourself. The Romanistic trend never accepted a contract of one single person, where the single person will be self-obligated. The classic Roman uh, trend up to just a little while ago only would accept contracts where there will be an agreement of will. You could not self-obligate yourself. And of course, they would accept their contracts of these uh, agreements of will that were bilateral, trilateral, and well, as I have mentioned, a trilateral agreement will be, for example, a trust where you have a settler and you will have a trust and you will have a fiduciary and a beneficiary. And if, for example, if I own a lot with a friend under equal places and we have half and half, and I want to sell my part to a third party, I have to elaborate a document where I would inform the owner that I will sell my part, that I will be selling at a certain amount, and they have the first opportunity right of buying it from me. And therefore, this has to be done through the notary public in accordance to the law. And well, this actually means that you can disseminate the sale and implement it actually. So when we have a condominium system, it means that we have all this first right of refusal. Within condominiums, you have this first right of refusal. There are certain condominium complexes where in its bylaw, they do request uh, an authorization in order to analyze the candidate to become a buyer of a condominium, understanding that it's 10 private units in a condominium, and one of the condominiums is to be sold, and their bylaw establishes that the future buyer must be checked in his life and his resume and his profession, and this is through the assembly. This is present in some of the condominium bylaws, but also in other bylaws, there is a preference right. But this preference right is not a first right of refusal. We ask all the members of the condominium to first offer their condominium to be sold to any other uh, co-owners of the condominium to see if anyone is interested in it. So in this condominium system, there is no first right of refusal. There is a right of preference in some of the bylaws, and also sometimes they do analyze candidates that will carry out the purchase. But this right of preference that I'm referring to you is not within the law. So the fact of analyzing and checking the buying candidate is not within the law. So you may follow or not this statement because you may recall that there is the issue that a minor legislation cannot be above a higher law. I mean, nothing, for example, nothing can be above the condominium law. So having clarified this to you, let me say to you that we don't have a first right of refusal present within the condominium system. You can have the preference uh, right if everyone states this and they will all follow. There is first right of refusal when you are a leaser, when you're a tenant in a place where you have leased a property for 10 years, and then you have the right to request or ask the owner if they're going to sell their property. If you are the tenant, you can request to be the first choice in buying it if I can pay the price or improve the price. Now let us continue and let me share with you that in order to have the consideration of being a condominium, having this category as a condominium owner, you must be an condominium owner, because I have expressed that within the assembly in the condominium, you can have the participation only of the condominium owners, and they have this condition of being condominium owners. I have shared with you that the administrator cannot participate quite often when there are founded reasons that there is some action of being dishonest, and there obviously the law states that the owners are the ones that integrate the assembly. But in a normal situation, Normally, the managers are present within the assemblies. Let's recall that major condominium complexes have administrative committees, others have administrative boards, others have managers, others have directors. You can call them any way you want to call them. But the manager or the condominium administrator can even make a call for having an assembly. But if there is any reason of doubting the honesty of the manager by the condominium owners, they have the right to hold their ordinary or extraordinary assembly meeting separately and take whatever decisions uh, that will either position the manager or take his post away from him. So once this is clear for you, let me now uh, tell you that later on we will see how the condominium associations are integrated and constituted. Another interesting element is that the condominium system can be integrated in a public deed as a project. My personal experience in all of my years as a notary public, this is not my advice that you will organize a condominium system in a project of something that is under construction. Because let's say that the builder or the developer would say, well, I will place a swimming pool in this area, or instead of having two bedrooms, I will have three smaller bedrooms in a flat. So all of these changes will have to be registered, and therefore the whole condominium system will have to be modified and rectified. Remember that the condominium system, if you have units that have been sold, you have to follow the law and abide it. And as I have explained to you yesterday, the system of condominium ownership can be modified in traditional ways. And I believe that some of the states, I believe the ones that have legislation that dates back to the 50s, because in many of the states of Mexico, I would say that they don't have a lot of condominium activity. We talk about unanimous decisioning in order to modify a condominium system or to also dismiss it. But if you are units that have been sold, only the condominium assembly are the only one that can authorize the extinction of the condominium system or to bring it back to its original state. This is by getting back their money, etc. Where I want to get through this is in the condominium system is integrated by following these concepts. I have seen many people that build up their building and then they decide to institute a system, and then they decide, well, we're not going to sell it. We're going to leave an apartment or a flat to each of our children. And well, here the condominium system will vanish, will disappear, and you will have another expression. We elaborate another deed, and well, the condominium system will change. The law, in great detail, would say that when the building is old and dangerous, this condominium system could be dismissed. Also by judicial order. This is when it is given a judicial order that condominium system is over. It is by force majeure. And when it has reasons of force majeure, I would also say that it could be disintegrated, it could be modified, it could be dismissed if any condominium owners decide so. And it could also be the case that the vote has to be above 75% in general terms. Recall, all laws are different in regards to condominium ownership. In my book regarding the condominium, I state here the federal district legislation that has 92 articles, and the condominium law in the state of Guerrero has 87 articles. And I am referring to this because I like the fact that when a condominium owner has any doubt and they want to check the law, Well, they can look at it within the my book. My book has the Social Special Attorney Office in the federal district legislation included because whenever there are any elements that have a conflict within the condominium complex, they can bring their claims to the courts in order not to saturate civil courts. And only in case there is no settlement, uh, well, then the social special attorney office will direct you to the courthouses. Now, the law is the one in the federal district is really the avant-garde legislation. There's even an article that provides the manager 30 days for them to start a training course and to be fully trained as a manager and will understand and carry on all the functions of a condominium manager. And this is explained in my book. And it's not only a manager, but there are many obligations entailed with the fact of being a condominium manager, such as keeping files where all of the labor contracts are kept, keep files where all of the obligations that are regarding tax payments. When the civil association of condominium, this civil association will have a board of directors and they will appoint a secretary. And the law also foresees in a mandatory way that the first manager could be designated by the developer of the condominium complex. And in a further assembly meeting, they can either remove him and appoint another manager that the condominium owners will place their trust on. Now, well, the condominium system is tremendously positive for inheritance law in regards to foreigners because, of course, we have to understand that the fiduciary is quite an important element. When we organize a condominium system, this is what the notary will request: a copy of the public deed. You cannot have a condominium system unless you're the owner of a real estate property, of a good. And well, as I have stated, you can carry out this system or the condominium system and organize it when it's in project. But for example, you see that there is a lot and it has little flags that say pre-sale. And well, you need not to have something constructed in order to sell it. We also need to describe the construction that will be subject to the ownership system of a condominium. Almost all of this is done by an expert. It's an architect or an engineer or because you cannot take lightly the design of the blueprints of a condominium because let's say that the measures of a condominium are not matching because sometimes even when we have a direct supervision, there are mistakes. Well, just imagine if the law will allow anyone to elaborate blueprints. Blueprints have to be elaborated by an expert, by a legal expert in this field. This is an engineer or an architect. And I mean, they have to have the precise measurements or a third party with a description of the public areas. Also, this is to be decided in the condominium system. As I have expressed to you, well, you will be owners of your private unit in an adequate and proportional area, and the same goes for all condominium owners in what has to do with the common areas. And well, these common areas are to be used only as common areas. Let me say to you that it is not allowed by no reason to modify the facade or nothing that is the common areas. This is facades of the buildings, much less, moving a pillar that could affect the stability of the construction uh, but unless you have the penalty of being accused of dispossession, let's, for example, if your apartment is in the lower part and you have a garden in front of you that is a yard that is not used by anyone, and you're the only ones that have access to this yard, and you decide to expand your terrace, well, you will be accused of dispossession because in reality you're dispossessing of this proportional part that belongs to other condominium owners. So this is not my advice to you. And I've seen many, many here. Here, for example, right around the America School, near where I live, there is a building created by Infonavit, and someone in the second or the third floor, in the back part of this, there was another piece of land, and well, he just raised his pillars 3 or 4 meters, and he extended his living room. And well, you can do so as long as no one sues you over it. But it is not my advice because any condominium owner, any neighbor, even the same assembly could subject you to a judicial process giving that could even be of criminal nature, which is not recommendable. So this is the common areas description. Now we describe each of the apartments that integrate the condominium complex. You have to describe what the condominium contains, what the apartment contains, number of uh, bedrooms, uh, for example, closets. In Acapulco, we have woodworms, and well, uh, we create a lot of things done uh, with cement. And of course, woodworm is voracious. In 6 months, you can lose all of your furniture and all of your wood uh, pieces in your apartment. We also have to establish the proportional part and value that each of the apartments is representing. Here, I omitted, obviously, as I have said to you, this proportional area, if it is a section of a condominium, if it is, let's say, a three-story flat, well, you own a third part of the condominium. If it has 10 apartments, it's a tenth. The construction license, when you have a developer, quite often they have been granted a permit, a construction permit. And well, for example, there are many old buildings, let's say in the Condesa area in Mexico City, that were even having stable rent payments since the time of World War II against the Rome, Germany, and Japan axis during World War II. And there were fixed rent fees. And please don't take this uh, for absolute certainty, but old buildings do not have a construction permit. And well, when we carry out our testimonial information with the witnesses that will attest that the building dates to the 1940s or 1950s, and well, maybe they will not have to present a construction permit. Condominium blueprints, individual blueprints, I always request them because they're important and necessary because normally one of these blueprints is registered in the different files. That is the original testimony. The other one goes to the buyer, and there is another set of files that is within the public registry of ownership, and the other one goes to the appendix of the notary public. Appendix notary publics have an obligation, as it is the case of the state of Guerrero. For example, we have to bind all of the photocopies of the files. I understand that, for example, in the case of the state of Nuevo León and the city of Monterrey. We don't need to do that. But any document that comes our way to be registered in our notary public offices must be fully safeguarded. And we request, for example, elements that we issue, such as the birth certificate, the marriage certificate, and the death certificate. And well, in the civil associations, foundations are made by lawyers. Uh, Different from us as no republics, we only do all of the actions of transfer of domains such as selling, purchasing, mortgages. Uh, there are many modalities because there are many atypical contracts. In the United States, you have what is called the entitled company, which is the function of a notary public for the transfer of a property. They produce the contracts, they present the contracts at the courthouse or at the county halls in each of the cities. But it is worth commenting this with you because whenever you want to get a certified copy from the United States, you will never get it because what they will send you is the assembly deed. They could sign uh, this deed before a notary public or ratify their decision before a notary public in the United States. But as I'm saying, they have a legal function. And it says that, well, whomever is in front of me agrees with what I'm saying. So, well, these functions have to do with notary publics. Differences between Mexico and the United States. Now, we also need a general blueprint. The general blueprints are not necessarily the blueprints of each apartment, but the whole condominium complexes, and they're huge condominium complexes. It's worth saying here to you that there are all kinds of condominiums. There are condominiums that are built going up. There are vertical condominiums. There are horizontal condominiums that are in horizontal properties or homes, mixed condominiums. Some are go up in buildings, and they also have small houses, compounds. There are condominiums that have to do with, for example, commercial lots, markets. In Acapulco, for example, there are markets that have a condominium system. For example, the one near the Diana Circle, there is a market called the Market of La Diana, and well, they each own their condominium uh, ownership, though they have their private units, and they're only 2 meters, 2 square meters, but they're true um, stores where they sell their handcrafts to the tourists, and this is a way to collaborate and contribute with local economy. There are also condominiums in industrial parks and the major industrial complexes. We in the state of Guerrero we only have but one uh, because our ways and roads, we are quite to the south of the country, and the geography of the state of Guerrero with mountains and sierras and hills is quite considerable because, for example, you would wonder why there are countries that have major highways such as France. Well, France is, except for the Alps and the Pyrenean region, it's like a pool table. I mean, with very few mountains, so it's very easy to uh, deploy highways. So Texas is like another pool table, so flat. If you want to make a highway from Mexico City to Acapulco, you have to go across the Sierra Madre, and there are bridges and mountains, and the highest bridges in the whole of Latin America are located precisely in the state of Guerrero, thanks to the work conducted by President Salinas de Gortari, and he was a president who had a renewing spirit uh, though we recall the September of 1994 element. I was deviated given industrial parks condominiums. But well, yes, as a matter of fact, I do not know if the Guerrero Industrial Park is following the condominium system. But I believe the industrial parks have condominium lots of, let's say, 10 hectares or more than that. We also have to present the banking and the tax registers because we used to pay 1% of the registry rights. This was uniformed with other records and registries in the whole of Mexico, and you pay in order to inscribe a system 2,400 pesos. But these were enormous real estate developments, and we talked about a lot of money. For example, if you were be building a condominium of $10 million, well, just imagine the almost 1% of this is a lot of money. So, well, and you had to have a tax evaluation process or an assessment uh, for whatever you were uh, challenging because you're not charging them a percentage. Also, the tax evaluation is mandatory because there you pay a tax for acquisition, which is of 2%. You also request the last property rights payment, and there is a bylaw of condominium within my book of condominium. In this book that actually uh, where I'm analyzing the condominium, I also place a model bylaw for you to take it. And if you're going to establish a small condominium system where you have a three-story building, or you have a family home that you want to subdivide in a comfortable subdivision, you know, uh, our parents normally have left us a property, a house, big or small, and however modest it is, normally our parents leave us with something. This is the case of my family, the Garcia Moore family, where our parents' home in our case, my sisters and I, we have a house where we have a private unit in this home, and mine is 68 square meters. And for example, living in France or in Spain in flats, flats are very small, 50 square meters, 40 square meters, because everything is terribly expensive. And we will get there in this country when we will not have uh, any more room within the capital cities. We all will be living in a condominium and in a small unit. And I almost always say that the Spanish legislations accepted to divide into flats after the mortgage law of 1856 and the mortgage law that established this system in 1915. So just for you to know, living in apartments in Mexico dates back to the colony time. The viceroy of Mendoza settled down in Pátzcuaro. As a matter of fact, my father's family comes from there. And the viceroy of Mendoza, when he came to Pátzcuaro, he placed this as his political center because Tenochtitlan, the Mexico City of this time, was totally devastated. And if you look at the main plaza in Pátzcuaro, and later on he moved to the city of Morelia, they have colonial palaces that have been there for 500 years, but they are true apartments. I know the home that belonged to my grandparents. It has three patios, 3 yards, and we're in the last yard. Well, we were growing herbs. We have different pots with different herbs that our people would use. We had, horse stables. We have the maids' quarters. And in Pascuaro, there's even a place that has 7 yards that is often visited by tourists. So living in sections or in flats has been transporting from the Romanistic Spanish legislations, and it has been actually moving as a magic carpet. All of the laws and all of the realms of Spain and, Spain, as we know it, was the realm of Castile and Aragon. And as a matter of fact, Charles V didn't speak Spanish. If I recall correctly, he spoke Flemish. Philip
Pero
II
se
did
sabe
speak
que él
Spanish,
vivía en
but
en lo que
it
hoy
is
es
known that he
Ámsterdam,
lives in
las
that
ciudades
Charles V lived in
en
what
el
is
centro
now Amsterdam
de
in the
los
Netherlands,
Países Bajos.
near Brussels.
Y
And
él fue un gran guerrero,
he
un gran
was a great
respeto.
warrior,
Sin embargo,
Charles
Felipe
V,
II era
but
más
nevertheless, Philip
pacifista
II was a
y todas
peacemaker,
las normas
and
regulatorias
all of the
españolas
regulatory standards of
les voy a
different
dar
deeds and titles.
una
Uh,
referencia de este
and
libro,
at a
Historia
point,
del
I
Derecho
will be
Internacional.
sharing a masterclass
Fernando
about
estableció una
notary law,
relación con
and
Trillas,
that is in its
en donde
second
habla
edition with
también
three
de
yes,
cómo
where I also refer to you
eh,
of
el
how
derecho de la colonia mexicana, pues
the
francamente era
right
transportado
of
como
colony times
alfombra mágica
were transferred
de
like in a
España a
magic
México
carpet from
para aquella
Spain
época,
into New Spain or
esencialmente
Mexico.
leyes feudales.
And they
Vamos
were
a analizar
basically
los tipos de
feudal laws.
condominios, pues
Now, analyzing
hay
the
unidades
different types of
industriales.
condominium, there
Hay
are
un tipo de
industrial parks.
condominio muy
Now, there
importante,
is a very
los
important type
lotes
of
condominales
condominium.
para
This
fraccionamientos.
is the condominium lots for developers.
Normalmente cuando se hacían
Normally speaking,
fraccionamientos en el
when
sistema
big
tradicional,
developing systems
pues
were
quien
done in the
desarrolla
traditional
lotes
system,
en la
a
península de las
developer,
playas,
such as here in this
eh,
peninsula, Las Playas, where we are located
donde
at,
se hizo el fraccionamiento Las Playas,
Las
se
Playas
entregaba a la ciudad el
uh,
fraccionamiento y la ciudad ya se
real
encargaba de
estate
limpiar las calles.
development took
Y así
place,
se
and the
construía
municipality was in charge of cleaning up the
para las
streets.
carencias
Well,
económicas,
the
no podía
municipality
mantener
that
las
has so
calles.
many economic problems
Ellos
could
actuaban
not
como
actually
árbitros de
look
arbitraje
after the
de cómo
streets.
quebrar los
You know,
barrios.
for example, they have sidewalks that are
Sin
broken, they
embargo,
don't cut the grass,
tratan
but nevertheless, the municipality tries to have the our area quite supported.
lotes condominales,
But in the
los
condominium
grandes
system,
fraccionamientos que se han hecho hoy,
the major
que se
condominiums
llamó
that have been done now,
Fonatur
such as
por
Fonatur,
primera vez en Cancún,
for the first time in
Huatulco,
Cancún,
Cabo San Lucas,
Huatulco, Cabo San Lucas,
en Loreto.
and Loreto,
El gobierno federal
the
adquirió
federal
grandes
government
terrenos,
will
grandes
acquire
condominios de miles
major
de hectáreas. Y
lots
entonces
of thousands of
hacían
hectares,
lotes
and
condominales.
they will create
Por ejemplo,
condominium lots,
un lote condominal de
such as,
20
for
hectáreas,
example,
pues era
a 20-hectare
un desarrollo,
condominium
¿no?
will be a development.
Hay desarrollos muy interesantes que
There
han
are quite
tenido
interesting developments, such as, for
villas y
example,
torres.
villas
No
and
torres altas,
towers,
pero sí villas y
not high
villas.
towers, but
A lo
good
que yo quiero
villas.
ir es que ahora
And
los fraccionamientos
what
modernos
I want to share
los
with you is that
implementan en un modelo
modern
condominio porque tiene la
developing
ventaja que las
complexes
áreas comunes,
follow the
que son
condominium
las calles,
modality. And of
son
course,
las
the
áreas
common
verdes,
areas are the
que son
streets, the green areas, the
los jardines,
gardens,
la pluma del policía, la
the
cisternas,
entrance barrier where the
la,
watchmen are
que
standing,
trata el agua, la
water
tratamiento
treatment
del agua.
plants.
Pues son áreas comunes para
All of
todos
these are common
los lotes que son
grounds,
grandes
and there are
condominios de grandes
other lots
dimensiones.
of other condominiums of major proportions.
Y así se hacen los grandes
And this is
condominios,
how the big
porque ya no se entregan
developments take place now,
a la
because
ciudad,
they are not handed over
sino
to the
que
city, uh,
los
but
condominios que
the
son
condominium owners,
dueños de
in
esos
these
grandes
cases,
lotes,
they are the
empiezan a
owners of
vender sus
these
lotes
major
en una parte
developing
diferente, en
areas,
otra parte
and
tienen que
they are
ceder
owners in a
colaborar con el
proportional part,
mantenimiento del
and
mismo.
they have to contribute with the
En este
maintenance
caso
of the
quiero hablar de
condominium.
este
And
fraccionamiento
in this
que les
particular case,
mencionaba que es,
in this
pues hay dos plumas
development that
ahí
is located
donde
in
todos se
Puerto
encargan de
Marquez, for
mantener el
example, they
mantenimiento
have
de las lonas,
security
el mantenimiento
barriers,
de
and
las
you have to
vallas que se
pay
hacen ahí
for the guards. You have the
y este es
patrolling system,
fraccionamientos
the
que
also the cleaning
los principales de la seguridad
and
pues, se preparan
all of the
por
issues that are cared for.
por
So
ejemplo en
the assembly
planeación,
prepares all of these
una designación del
topics.
administrador,
If you have to appoint a
se puede
manager,
ocultar en una convocatoria y tratar de
cannot
que en
be
juntos generales ya al
uh,
final se nombre al administrador.
omit it
Los temas
and appoint
principales
him
que
at the very last
tratan
point of the assembly.
en las
This
prácticas
is
verbales
agreed within the call, where there is an
de la
agenda
asamblea
that is
ordinaria
previously
y luego
agreed for the
como lo
ordinary
principal
assembly,
no se puede
where the
ventilar
main
los temas generales.
issues cannot be
Vamos a
considered
ver lo que
as
es
a
la
general
Junta de
issue. We
Condóminos.
will see the
Lo que
condominium
vamos a
board.
hacer es
We will also see
el comité de vigilancia,
the
los atributos que tiene el administrador del condominio.
supervising committee,
Vamos a
the
ver la asociación
attributes
de
of the
condominios.
condominiums. We'll see the
Recuerden que son
condominium
tres tipos, lo que les
association
dije en
and
el
their functions. And you must
puedes estar
recall, as I said to you
asociado de
during the
forma
first
normal
segment, you may be
y sus
formally
efectos
associated,
solamente van a
and
surtir
the
efectos
purposes
si
will
aceptamos
only
las
be
decisiones de
affected
ellos
if you take
mientras
the
no tengamos
decisions among
problemas.
yourselves, as long
Si
as you
usted
don't have a
tiene un
problem.
condominio
But if
nuevo,
you
si no
have
tiene todos
a
si no
condominium
están eh,
owner that is
protocolizados o no tienen
behind in his
compromiso con la
payments,
cultura de
uh,
su constitución,
and
sus
if they
oficinas
don't have all of the
autoridades
civil
formalizadas de
constitution or
acuerdo a
their
la
deed
ley en el sentido
formalized in
jurídico,
accordance to the law in
ellos
a
tienen
public deed,
personalidad
they
jurídica
will not
para
have legal
defenderse.
personality in
Nosotros
order
le
to
vamos
defend
a ver el
themselves.
asunto por
And they can
ausencia de personalidad jurídica.
not settle the
Entonces,
issue given absence of
también
legal
la ley dice que
personality
cualquier
or
reunión que
representation.
haya
The law states that any
con
condominium
un interés
meeting
común en
that
el
takes
condominio
place
se
given the common
considera
interest
que
of the
es una
condominium owners
asociación.
that
Es
will
así
be
como yo lo digo en
considered
el libro.
that the
Si van
condominium are
ustedes a un
meeting.
cóctel o a una
Let's say
comida
that if you
con
go to a
amigos,
cocktail party
bueno,
or
esa no es una
a
reunión de
celebration,
condominio,
that
esa
is
es
not a condominium
una social.
assembly meeting. That is a
Y las
social
juntas
meeting.
también, las
And
juntas, como ya se llaman
also
comercialmente también,
the condominium
pues
boards,
es
as I have
cuando deben
expressed in the
tener
previous
inspección de
segment,
agua
that is when
o
you
el
have, for
ciclo del
example,
agua
a water
o
leak if the
el
guard
ciclo de
didn't show up
refrigeración,
or no one
eh,
attended the session or the
que
meeting,
la lavandería
that the laundry
se descompuso.
is
Entonces
broken,
las
and
mercantiles tienen
so
activos
mercantile
en el
associations have
patrimonio de
assets that is
de la
part
asociación.
of
Eso no es
the
cierto con los
assets of the
condominios, no
association,
son
and
acciones en la
condominiums do
asociación
not
como
have
tal.
assets,
Sí tienen patrimonio.
but they do
El
have
patrimonio va a ser las
condominiums
computadoras
have
del
assets
condominio,
such as, for example, the
los
computers
servicios
that the condominium will use,
informáticos,
for example, all
las
the
llamadas
umbrellas
telefónicos, pero
and
también puede
all
ser
of the
pero sí
pool
son parte
furniture. But
de
this
los
is part of
de,
their assets that will be
de la asociación de condominios.
a part of
Las
the
grandes cuentas de la
belongings of the
asociación son también
condominium
condominios y
association.
su cuenta de cheques del
And
banco
also, you will have your banking check account,
formalizado.
and it has to
Eso
be
es todo,
fully
amigos.
documented. Well, that is
Eso es
all
gracias. Han sido
uh,
muy amables.
for you today, my
Hasta
friends,
la
and
próxima.
I thank you very much, and we shall meet again very soon. Thank you.